Hello, this is Sudhakar Moparthi. Today we're going to see access policy guidelines for Amazon S3 objects, buckets, objects. And what we're going to see is when to use ACLs, when to use bucket policy, when to apply object ACLs, and how cross-account permissions can be given, and what are some of the user policies that can be used to give access to some objects using identity policies, and then how permissions can be delegated. In a previous video, I think I have discussed about this permission delegation, but we will cover this. Okay, so that's all it is. This whole English text, I converted into a c1c2 diagram, and I'm going to discuss this ability to access these S3 objects and buckets from different accounts using policies or access control lists. That's what this entire section of S3 documentation. All right, let's go and show just the diagram. Okay, so what we have is we have a bunch of accounts, and we have a whole bunch of policies. So I can create a resource policy. A resource policy, the moment you say resource policy, it has to have a policy and it has to have a resource, which is in this case a bucket. And this bucket has these objects, and this object I can create ACL. I can create an ACL, and then that ACL I can give it to a different account. Okay, so that's the loop. Or because on this account I have a policy, user policy, identity policy. Identity policy is nothing but user, which should have a user, and then should have a policy. And because of this policy, I can do those actions on that object. And so it's basically you have to have either a policy or an ACL to access that object. So if it is done through ACLs, then you have to apply that to each object. So that's kind of a problem, right? I mean, you have thousands and thousands of objects, and then you have to apply ACL, access control, for each object. It becomes very tedious. That's why what we would do, we would just use a bucket policy, and so that is nothing but resource policy. The resource is in this case, resource is a bucket, and we control through this policy. We can control the access to all these objects through this bucket. And sometimes I may want to only give it to a couple of users on this bucket. So then at that point I can use a identity policy and then attach that user to that policy. And in this policy, I will give access to this bucket, but now I am controlling the access to just this user. So depending upon the situation, you have to either use a couple of users, then you can just use user policy or bucket policy. But I would prefer to use resource-based policies more often than other things. Okay, and cross account. Suppose I give permission to this account to upload objects to my bucket. And at that point, who owns that object? The account, this account, the account that is uploading the object owns, if this account uploaded the object to this bucket, then this object is owned by this account. But how will this account will get access? There are two choices. One is because it is my bucket. This is a bucket of the in this account. I can just say anybody who uploads here into this bucket, that's I should control the access. So then I can define my bucket policy, and this bucket policy will dictate who can access and what should happen, because I'm the owner at that point. Or I don't want to own those objects, so I just leave it to the account that is uploading. Now they cannot define a resource policy, so they can only create an ACL and attach that ACL to this object, and that's how you provide. So you got these policies, user policies, resource policy, bucket policies, ACLs, and different accounts. So you just create these objects and attach them to appropriate bucket or appropriate user to control access to the object. And if you read this documentation once, you will get more idea. But they're basically saying what I just said about this whole page in this c1c2 diagram. All right, that's all I have for today. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.